The following interview was conducted with Stewart Saunders, collection librarian and associate professor of library science for the Purdue University Oral History Program. It took place on Monday, April 29, 2013 in Archives Swain Instruction Room. The interviewer is Katherine Markee, professor emerita of library science. Welcome, Stewart.
Thank you
very much.
I'm glad to be here.
Okay, tell us a little bit about where you were born and your parents and siblings in early years.
Okay, I don't know how much of this you want. I can go on and on and on, or I can just give you a little.
Okay.
I was born in Bradenton, Florida. That's south of Tampa, north of St. Petersburg. April 3rd, 1936. My grandfather Saunders operated what you could call a truck gardening farm south of Bradenton. He raised tomatoes and lettuce and celery for the New York market. He raised it there in the wintertime and shipped it north. My grandfather Stewart, my mother's father, had been off and on sheriff of Manatee County, and he also had an automobile agency there in Bradenton. My dad ran the family farm for a few years, but this is Depression years, so he finally gets out of the farming business and becomes a newspaper editor. And so to move along, December 7th, 1941, we were living in Jacksonville, Florida. My dad is editor of the Florida Municipal Record, which is a publication. Comes along Pearl Harbor. Now, my dad would probably not have been drafted because he had a son, 5-year-old son, but he felt maybe he ought to enlist and go. So he enlisted in the Army, became a 90-day wonder. I don't know what that means anything, but you go through officer training school in 90 days and you come out a second lieutenant. So that's what he did. So from 1941 for the next 5 or 6 years, our life is discombobulated. I mean, we're moving, moving around. At one point, my dad went to Europe. War was still on in Europe, so my mom and I stayed in Bradenton, and she had a job with the telephone company in Bradenton. That's what she had done mostly. She worked in the telephone company. So when the war is over in Europe, he comes back home, but the war's still going on in the Pacific. So he comes home, comes to Bradenton, stays a few weeks, and then he heads to the West Coast thinking he's going to be shipped out to the Pacific. Well, before he gets to California, the war in the Pacific is over. So he tells my mom, telegraphs us, I don't know what, says, well, I'm here in California. He's in Fort Ord, California, in Monterey, California. Come on out. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So we go out and we live in California for basically a year. It was wonderful. We were living in Monterey. Our house, he rented a house for us. We were about 4 or 5 blocks from the bay, and at night you could hear the seals barking. It was just wonderful, Then he gets discharged. We go back to Florida. My dad had not been to college. Well, there's the GI Bill, so he's going to take advantage of the GI Bill. So he enrolls in Emory University, which means starting in about 5th grade for me, I'm 10 years old, for the next 6 years, we're living in the Emory University in Atlanta, in the Emory University community. And I'm going to a school called Druid Hills School, elementary school. It's all, they did elementary, high school there. So I started there in the 5th grade, and I go up through my freshman year in high school there. And
What was grade school like? Was it a large school or a large class, or?
No, we had about 30 students.
Okay.
It was. I mean, you're looking late 40s here.
Sure. Okay.
So no, it was. But you got to remember, it's almost like being in the Purdue community in West Lafayette.
It's like the campus, the schools on campus and academics.
It's hard. It's strong on academics because you have faculty kids going there,
Sure.
And of course a lot of them were not faculty kids, but this is quality school. I was a fairly good student, but I wasn't. I did not apply myself. Let's put it like that. But I got by, And then my dad finished at the Candler School of Theology, 1951, I'm thinking, and he comes out with a degree in theology, and he gets called to a church in Richmond, Indiana, and to be an associate pastor in Richmond. So I do my sophomore and junior year at Richmond High School. Now, this is a huge high school, 2,000 students. It was okay. You know, I had friends there. You know, we had little pockets of friends, but, you know, this large high school, I found a little uncomfortable. Well, at the end of my, in the summer after my junior year, he gets appointed to a church in Leesburg, Indiana. Now, you probably don't know where that is. It's about 10 miles north of Warsaw. It's a small community, just a few miles from Lake Tippecanoe. Small high school. This is prior to consolidation. So I go to a high school that's much smaller than Richmond, and I loved it. It was wonderful. You know, you had after basketball game parties, and everybody got together.
The community.
Yeah, it was a community thing, and you knew everybody in your. Well, I graduated in a class of 17. Wow. We had a great senior trip. You know, they had already raised the money for the senior trip by the time I got there. I didn't put much into it, but I was included. And we had a great senior trip. We went to New York City, Washington, D.C., took a ride on the Potomac and overnight in a boat, and we were gone about 2 weeks. I mean, and so anyway, that was it. Any reflections on that? Yeah, I had favorite teachers. I think I had good. I mean. Even in Richmond was a good high school. I mean, I was on the college track. They had a college track and a non-college track. So on the college track, I had very good teachers. I had good English teachers. I had good science teachers. It was good. So I can't complain. I mean, it was a big place, but still, the academics was good. And so I've had, you know, all through my K through 12 school, I've had good teachers,
good.
And
now,
I really appreciate them.
Now, college. How did you went to DePauw?
Right.
How did you select that, or how did that come about?
Well, okay. This is how that came about. I really didn't want to go to IU. Couple of my friends in my graduating class at Leesburg were headed to IU, but I really didn't want to go. Big university. Now. DePauw, okay, my dad is a Methodist pastor. DePauw is a Methodist denominated school, you know, loosely associated. But at the time I went there, if you were the child of a Methodist pastor, you got half off on your tuition. So rather than paying $500 a semester, I paid $250 a semester to go there, which was quite nice.
Yeah. Right.
Then of course there was the dorm, but you know, that was good, you know. And like a lot of people going to college, I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went there. I enjoyed my years at DePauw. I went there and enrolled as a pre-med student because I think, well, maybe medicine would be what I want to do. Well, actually, I love science. You know, I took physics, I took calculus, I had inorganic chemistry, I took organic chemistry, I had comparative anatomy, I took embryology.
All the prerequisites.
Yeah, all the prerequisites for medical. You're not really doing medicine, you're just doing these science courses. And I loved it. But then my senior year, I said, okay, 4 more years of medical school after this, and I'm really going to be dealing with living people and not specimens. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this. And so I guess it was sort of a minor crisis for me. I don't think I want to do this, but what do I want to do? Because at that time, I didn't have any plans. So
a little soul searching. My parents were a little disappointed that I didn't want to go ahead, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, this is 1958, 1959. They still had the draft. So when you finished college, you were drafted. So that's what happened. The way the draft worked back then is you were drafted for 6 years. You spent 2 years active duty, then 4 years in inactive reserve. So I was drafted into the military. I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky to do my basic training. And then of all places, I was shipped off to Brooklyn, New York for the rest of my military career.
I spent the rest of my 2 years at Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. Fort Hamilton sits right on the bay. It was built by, actually it was designed and built by Robert E. Lee before the Civil War. It's an old base. But at this time at the time it was built, it was to guard the entrance to New York Harbor. And here I am up on a barracks. I can look out one end and see the harbor. It was kind of nice, you know. And
you got to see New York too.
Stay in New York. At this time, it was a processing post. Troops coming back from Europe came in through here and got their orders to go wherever, either get their discharge or go out. That's what we did there. It was a process. It was a administrative post, what it was, and it was kind of a small post. From my barracks to Times Square was about an hour on the subway. That's walking time to the subway, getting home. And so weekends, New York City. This is peacetime. Vietnam has not started yet, so this was peacetime. And
it was after the Korean War.
After the Korean War, but before Vietnam. So it was good duty. I had friends there. You know, we would go in. Suddenly living in New York City, coming from Indiana, and suddenly you're man, my goodness, what is all of this? And so you would be paid. You know, I think our pay at that time was around $90 a month, but you didn't have to spend it for anything because your food and everything else was provided for you. So the $90 a month was.
You do pretty well.
You go in and you spend it, and you enjoy yourself. So that was good. But then I still had to decide, okay, once I'm discharged, what do I do? And I was discharged. After I'd done my 2 years. I came back home. By this time, my parents were in Goshen, Indiana. So I come back to Goshen. And I'd sort of always had an interest in history. When I was in high school, I'd always enjoyed it. I said, well, maybe I'll go into history. And I had a background in science, so I was thinking, well, maybe do something in history of science or something like that. So I applied at Ball State. And I started at, let me get my years correct here. I started at Ball State in 1961, summer of 1961. I did a master's degree in history, just straight history. And I finished spring of 62. So I got a master's degree in history. So what do I do with that? What are the employment projects? I did not have an education degree. I thought of getting an education degree and going into high school and teaching history, but I wasn't ready for that. So I head off to IU, thinking, well, I'll do some more graduate work in history. So I get down to IU. I'm rolling in the graduate program in history there. And this is where my career changes. I met a fellow named Irwin Welch. He worked in the library at IU. He was a bibliographer for history. And I got to know him. And he said, Stewart, library science is a pretty good career. You can match your love of history and be a librarian. I started thinking about it, and I said, well, that's not a bad idea. Because at that time, even if I get a history degree, what do I do with it? So that looked good to me. So I started my master's degree in library science in the fall of 1963, finished in the summer of 1964. And I get a job at Ohio State University Libraries. And I have to tell you, back in the 60s, jobs were not hard to find, not like the 70s and 80s. So what I had been hired for at Ohio State was something called an intern program. It was not a guaranteed job. It was an intern program, but I took that over. Actually, Ohio University in Athens had also offered me a job. I figured I'd go to Ohio State. It might be more interesting. So my first job at Ohio State was I spent the first 3 months in the acquisitions department, learning acquisitions. The next 3 months in the catalog department, doing cataloging the way they did it then. This is prior to AACR2. It's the old, And they were very stringent on catalog. I mean, you had to do it exactly right. I would show them, they had a head cataloger, and I'd finish, and I thought I had it right. I'd show it to her, and she said, well, you got to change this. They had, besides the cataloging rules, they had a black binder about this thick with all variations on the rules. And they would look through the rules. But it was interesting. I learned to catalog. And then the next 3 months I spent in the reference department, which I found enjoyable. And then the summer, the last 3 months, I spent in the business library, being a business librarian, working with the business library.
Sounded like a good program.
It was a good program.
Yeah.
And when I finished, they said, well, what we have open now is in the acquisitions department. Would you like to work in the acquisitions? So I started in the acquisitions department. Well, they gave me a title. They called it Social Science Bibliographer. Now, what that meant was I had authority to select and buy materials in political science. The other social sciences, I did basically bibliographic verification. Back in those days, you don't order a book until you've verified it. You go to the NUC, you try to find it, and if you can't find it there, you go to other bibliographers, and they won't let a purchase order go out until you have verified that the author and the title and the publication are all correct. So I did that for several years. It was a good experience. I learned a lot.
Good basic getting started.
It's a good way to get started.
Right.
And I did that for about 3 years. It was good. I enjoyed it. And then a position in the reference department opened up. Somebody left from over there. And so I applied for that, and they said, sure, come on. So I went over to the reference department.
This would be in their main library?
Main library reference department. Okay. Yeah. No, I other than 3 months in the business, I didn't work in any. They had an engineering library, they had agriculture library, life sciences library. Just the way it was here back then. But I did not go out into that area. So I started, and I sort of stayed in the reference department up until the time I came to Purdue, except for 1 year, they did not have a documents library. The one left, they didn't have another one, so I was asked to be interim documents librarian for a year. So I was interim government documents librarian for a year until they could find somebody. Other than that, I stayed in the reference department. I think I need to backtrack a little here. While I'm working at Ohio State, I met the woman who's going to be my wife, Margaret Overholt. Her nickname was Margot. So I met her there in 1968. She was a student working in the library, and I met her. And she went to Ohio Wesleyan, and she was majoring in anthropology, but they didn't offer many courses in anthropology at Ohio Wesleyan. So she came down there in the summer to get some anthropology courses, more that Ohio State would offer. And we started dating. Well, the next year she had to go back to Ohio Wesleyan, which is only 20 miles from Columbus, so I kept seeing her. And so eventually it developed, and we became engaged. We were married in December, right around Christmas time, December 27th, 1969, 2 days after Christmas. Well, by the time she had already finished at Ohio Wesleyan, she was now a graduate student at IU in Bloomington. And here I am working in Columbus, Ohio State University. So that first year of marriage, we commuted. She took my car. She didn't own a car, so she took my car, lived in Bloomington, and every weekend she drove to Columbus. And that's how we did our first year of marriage. It lasted.
It worked out.
It worked out, yeah. And so, she was aware that I had done some she was doing graduate work in anthropology down at IU. Occasionally I came over there, and would spend some time with her. She was aware that I had done some graduate work in history and might like to continue it. And she's saying, Stewart, at your age, if you're going to continue it, you need to do it now or forget about it. Basically, that's what she said. Because she was in graduate school and making progress. I said, okay. So, a couple of years, we'd been married a couple of years. Well, I'm here at Ohio State. I have a good history department. I'll enroll in the graduate program again and just see how it goes. So I enrolled in the history program
At Ohio State?
at Ohio State. Let's just see how it goes. I'll pursue graduate studies. My interest had been French history. We'll just go there. And my wife was doing anthropology at IU. So we're suddenly, and the library was very nice. They let me go work half-time. And so I needed courses. They let me work half-time, take courses. Did that for a couple of years, got my coursework out of the way. I liked the professors I was working with, so I said, well, this is pretty good. I think I'll continue it. So, but then, I did finish my coursework, but then my wife was done with her coursework at IU in 1973, and she had a Fulbright Hays to go to Africa. And there was enough money for both of us to go. Wasn't much money back in then, but it was. So I asked Ohio State, "Can I take a year off and go with my wife?" They said, "Oh, sure." They were very good about giving me leaves to go do something else. I sometimes look back on it and think maybe I abused that privilege, but anyway.
They would have let you know.
Yeah. So anyway, they gave me a year off. So in September of 19, we head off to the Niger Republic in Africa. Now, the Niger Republic is not Nigeria. It's north of Nigeria. It has the southern border is Nigeria, against with Nigeria, and the northern border is with Libya and Algeria. The northern half of this country is in the Sahara Desert, but we were in the southern half. And we spent a year there. And she does her research among the house. Studying. She was particularly interested in how women managed marriage and divorce in this particular society, because the customs. This is a Muslim society, so how the women and men and women interact differently within this kind of society. So we were there and we did the work and spent a year there. It was good.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah. So then we come back. She's writing her dissertation. We come back to Columbus. I pick up my job at Ohio State in '74, and I'm kind of trailing along, not doing much. Finally, I take my qualifying exams and say, okay, I need to do my dissertation. So I get another leave from Ohio State University for 6 months. So we aren't funded this time. We were funded to go to Africa. We're not funded this time, but somehow we had put together enough money to go to Paris for 6 months in September 1976. So we arrive in Paris. I start working in the archives there. We arrive on the 1st. She was pregnant, expecting a baby in late October. Baby comes 14th of September, 2 weeks after we're there. That changes a lot.
Somewhat.
Yeah. So anyway, our son Larry was born. So I finished my research there. Of course, all I'm doing is going to the archives and taking notes or photocopying material. That's basically what I'm doing. And I am sort of back doing work in the history of science, which is sort of what I wanted to do. I was working on the Royal Academy of Science in the 17th century. And my advisor directed me there. He said, well, sir, you have this background in science. You can go and look at what the Academy of Science is doing and read it and actually understand what they're doing. I said, yeah, I suppose I can. So yeah. So that's what I did. So then we come back to Columbus, and I'm coming back, and I'm saying to myself, well, I've been here at Ohio State kind of a long time, and maybe it's time to look around and go someplace else. So in the summer of 1977, I go off to ALA at Detroit. I put in my application that I'm job hunting. I kind of look at the people who are looking for jobs, don't really see much of anything. So I come back from from ALA. This is summertime. So in about September, I get this letter from Purdue University from somebody named Laszlo Kovac. And he says, I saw your letter in the file at Detroit. We have a job here in the reference department, and we're looking for somebody with a background in history. Or would you be interested? DePaul. I never thought of Purdue. I never thought of Purdue. I said, well, and you're not far apart. I'll come over for an interview. So I drive over. I meet with Joe Dagnese. I meet with Laszlo. I just drive over, spend a day, and drive back. And a few weeks later, this is before they had search committees. You just come in, you interview with the director, you interview with a few other people, and that's it. So about a few weeks later, Joe Dagnese calls up and says, we're ready to offer you a job at such a price. I specified what I had wanted in the way of salary, and it's a little bit below that. But he said, well, it's a little bit below that, but you really need to look at our retirement system here. It's really pretty good. I said, well, yeah, I guess you're right. So okay.
So we came.
So I came.
Okay. That brings us to Purdue. So you were a reference librarian then for a couple of years, and then you became you're in a history bibliographer, but then collection.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. I started out here. Now, when I started here in '70, I started in January 1978. They don't really have. They have liaison librarians. That's what we were called. We were called liaison. You were not bibliographers. You did not really select materials, but you were liaison. You worked with them. So I was liaison with the history department and the foreign language and literature department because I had language background, French. I speak French. I knew a little German, and that's all you need. So I worked with those two departments as liaison for a few years. In 1980, I actually finished my dissertation, get my degree. My wife got her degree in '79. I get mine in '80. So we're past that. So once I had my degree, Laszlo takes me over to the history department and says, well, we'd sort of like to have him change the name to bibliographer and let him do some of the selection for you. So in a sense, I start working with the history department.
Okay.
And, the first years here were very interesting. We moved in December 1977. We had bought a house over on Everett Street, which is about a block from the Columbian Park. My son is 15 months old, and so my wife, and we came here without my wife having anything to do. Well, we'd been in the house about a month, and this fellow comes knocking at the door. I'm at work, and Margot's at home with the baby, and this guy comes knocking at the door, and she's still, oh, who is this? So she opens it. He said, I'm Bill Morris from the Agricultural Economics Department. I understand you've done work in Africa. Well, yeah, I'm kind of trying to finish up my dissertation. He says, Agricultural Department here has just received a multi-million-dollar grant to do agricultural development in West Africa. And we're looking for people with experience out there. Well, suddenly she has a job as a visiting assistant professor in agricultural economics. Now, agricultural is not what she knows, but she does know the area. I mean, they're working right back.
Well, that's where the grant was to that department.
To the department from USAID to send people out and do research there was a drought going on at the time. This is an area called the Sahel. It's a little south of the Sahara. And there's a drought going on, and agriculture wasn't really feeding the people. And so Bill Morris had put together this proposal to USAID, and I don't know, got a couple $1 million in funding. And he was able to hire, what he did was he was able to get graduate students in the Ag Econ department to work with him. And to do their dissertations, he would give them money to go out to Africa, collect the data, and then bring it back and write it up as their dissertation. But he also got the data to analyze to see what were the problems in agriculture, and that he was running mathematical models and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
My wife did not go out to Africa, he had her there sort of training the graduate students on and putting together questionnaires and all of that sort, because they were doing questionnaires and collecting data and that all had to be coded and put on the computer and everything. So it was kind of interesting because for the next few years, there's her social circle, which is people in agricultural economics, people in agronomy, people in entomology, and there's my social circle, which is over here in the library. So it was a very interesting time because, they would have social events and I'd go with them, and I'd have social events and she'd come with me. We'd go out, Laszlo would have something, or Bill or people, and so it was like we were operating in two different, and it was very invigorating, to be working in these two worlds. And so suddenly I become acquainted with agriculture and agricultural problems. Not because I'm studying it, because I'm going to these people where people are sitting around talking about it.
Sure, right.
And it was wonderful, So.
Okay, that covers
And
everything.
so that job for her lasted 2.5 years, I think, 3 years. And then she did a little consulting after that, but then that kind of dwindled out for her. But anyway, so
I think
where am I?
A little bit about your research area. You sort of addressed that in some of the things that you've done.
Yeah.
The library collection, being the collection librarian, and then France was your research. The value of information, you've done some research in that area?
Yeah. Okay. I became interested in it, and, I don't know why I became interested in it, but I don't know. Well, let's go back to the 70s and 80s. Libraries were struggling to some extent with fiscal and financial problems. Costs were going up everywhere. Certain people had already done research trying to create efficiencies in libraries. A fellow named Philip Morris did something on library effectiveness, which is basically applying sort of operation research things. Do you remember, what was her name? She was assistant director here.
Oh, Miriam Drake?
Miriam Drake. She was doing this stuff, And I don't know, somehow I fell into some of the stuff she was doing, trying to create efficiency. There were other people. There was a group called the King Associates who were trying to look at libraries. They were particularly looking at scientific libraries and trying to monetize the value of what the literature provided for these scientific research in downstream. In other words, in terms of, it was sort of a cost-benefit analysis.
Well, Oliver Dunn was doing some of that, and Warren Seibert was another one.
Yeah, they're right. They were both doing that. And then there was a fellow over in mechanical engineering who was also working in that, I think. I can't remember his name now. I got to know him.
Okay.
And, they were trying to determine the downstream value. Working with scientists, they were doing cost-benefit. They would ask the scientists, okay, you were able to read the literature on your research project. These were people who had grants. You were able to read the literature, and by reading the literature, it saved you a certain amount of money. If you had not had that literature, how much would what would have been the cost overrun on that research project? And so they had to come up with it mentally, and it was ballpark. But that's the way they monetize the value of scientific literature. And it was kind of, so I thought, well, maybe I could do some of this. And so I got involved in it. I read some stuff. Actually, I took a second sabbatical, which was basically to do that. It's kind of hard. It really is. I did do one article. It's called Cost Efficiency of ARL Libraries, where I basically put together some econometric models of about 90. I got the literature and the data from ARL, inputs and outputs and all of that, and wrote this article, using econometric models. But after that, we sort of got away from that idea, and from there we sort of went to the idea of assessment. It's really hard to monetize the value of a library. The university would love it if we could, but it's really difficult to do.
challenging.
I mean, it's hard enough at the university to monetize the value of what they teach their students. They do assessment
Yeah.
anyway.
Let's move on. Let's talk about live qual. That was a big thing that you were
Yeah,
involved in.
and that's assessment.
Right.
Yeah, no, so get away from this idea of monetizing the value. Let's just do assessment. So in 2005, we decided to do the live qual survey here, which had been developed at Texas A&M for libraries all over the country. It's still being done today. It's a survey, an online survey, and Jim asked me to do it because I'd used statistical analysis in some of my other research publications. So he asked me to do it, and I said, sure, I'll do it. So I had to go to ALA and get some training, and I think I went out to, read the manual and have questions. And
It's a big project.
It's a big project. So, yeah, it was a good project. We did a survey. We collected, I think we had close to 1,000 responses on it, both from faculty and undergraduates and graduate students. I sort of ran, I had to follow ARL guidelines, do it exactly the way they did, which was fine. And I think it told us a lot about what the results we got back told us a lot about the live qual. Basically is trying to determine three things: how good is your service, how good is your collection, and how good are your physical facilities. That's basically what they're trying to do. But they ask all sorts of questions about it, And the reason they're asking all sorts of questions about it is this is a test that's put together with certain psychometric principles that, the way people who do survey analysis put away questionnaires, they follow certain scientific principles. That's the reason you have it that way. And I know some librarians, well, why are they asking this question? Well, because they need that question to help construct
I hear you, right.
Yeah.
And then you gave a presentation.
I gave a presentation at one of the all-staff things.
Right.
We made some major changes in our website because of this. We made some changes in one of the things that really came back very negatively was not only from faculty but graduate students too. Not so much undergrad, but graduate students and faculty were the fact that we just did not have enough journal and book, mainly journal resources. We were. It didn't look good for us, and so we set about to correct some of that, and we did. We made corrections we made some corrections based on some. They also had comments in there, so we could look at the comments and make change. We made changes. I didn't. I had done the survey, but Jim appointed...
An output of it.
The output, yeah. And then Jim appointed different other people to deal with some of the issues there. And we did the survey again in 2008, and we looked much better. Yeah.
Are they planning, do you think they're going to do it again?
I don't think so. Jim had a meeting about 2011, 2012, saying, do we want to do this again? And I think the feeling was, well... I think to some extent there was a feeling that libraries, because of automation and everything, had kind of moved beyond what this questionnaire was asking.
That's what I think.
And if we want to do another survey, we should develop our own survey.
Which is geared more to the in-house, what you're doing
Yeah,
here.
more to in-house. Now, live qual was developed so all libraries did the same, and you could compare yourself to peer institutions, which we did. We did a little comparison there. But we didn't use that too much. We were mainly focused inwardly here.
Sure,
So,
right, okay.
So,
You've done some teaching and instruction in quite a bit with the history in some of the departments.
right, yeah.
And-
Just about every department in the College of Liberal Arts, I've
Right.
done some. A lot of it was in history, various history classes, also foreign language and literature. I did a fair amount, but also political science.
You did some English too.
I did some English,
Right,
foreign
yeah.
language, literature. I anthropology. I even did a few in forestry.
You're pretty knowledgeable. You can.
Well, you and I worked together back when we were doing the database. You and I worked together. I remember when I came here, databases were just coming of age, and you set up training for us to go down to Indianapolis to get training in database searching. And so you and I were working closely on that together while databases, before the web came along. Once the web came along, then skill in database searching sort of declined as a important thing. But
it ran for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that libraries preservation project that you were involved in.
Okay. Well, let me start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Of it. Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I was at ALA in 1989. This is down in Dallas, and Emily Mobley said, she had been going to the CIC Collection Development Officer group that met at ALA each summer and then at midwinter. And she said, I'm getting tired of this job. Would you do it for me, Stuart? She said, you're not collection development officer. See, all the other libraries out there had collection development officers who were in charge of the collections. We didn't have any such person. She said, you're not collection development officer. You're just my representative at this CIC meeting. And, I want you to go there, report back to me. This is starting in 1989. I did this job until Cheryl Kern-Simarenko came, and then she sort of took it over. I did it for about 6 years, I think, about 1995 she took it over. But while you're doing the collection development officers, the CIC preservation officers meet right afterwards. So would you go to the preservation meeting too? So I was the unofficial preservation officer for Purdue at the same time. So we're in one group, the whole issue for the CIC was the cost of journals, the cost of books. Can we collaborate within the CIC? You understand that's a Big Ten universities plus University of Chicago, and that's who we were. And we struggled with that, and it was just hard to come up with a way to cooperate. Yeah. But it was actually easier to cooperate on preservation. That's where we could get some cooperation, because what the CIC preservation group was doing was applying to NEH for preservation grants. We had the issue that, suddenly we were aware that all this acid paper stuff was falling apart. We were losing our collections, and how are we going to preserve this? And so any National Endowment for the Humanities was being very generous in giving out money. And the CIC had already done one project, and Purdue had sort of opted out. Well, we don't really have anything here that we really need to preserve. So when the second one came along, Emily said, I think we need to be part of this one. So Mark Tucker and I put together a proposal, and we said, well, what are we strong in? Well, Purdue is known for railroads. And so we put together a proposal dealing with railroads. And here's what it was. We have certain old 19th century books that are falling apart that need to be preserved. But what we really had was the Baldwin engineering diagrams from the Baldwin Locomotive Company from about 1890 up to about 1920. These were big. They were in books. They were in big folio volumes up in our attic, rotting. I think there must have been 20 volumes of them. It was huge. And so we said, we really need to preserve these, but because Baldwin locomotives, a lot of the development for that was done here at Purdue.
Goss. Goss,
right, yeah. So we put that in too. And so that was part of the project, and suddenly I'm involved. Half my time now is taken up with this preservation project because I have to make quarterly reports to NEH on what we got done, how much we spent, and it came out I think it came out very well, because we did, fortunately, you're looking at Diana, the size of this, 4x4, bigger, they were huge. And what we found was down at the State Library, in Indianapolis, they had the facilities for doing that. And because we were a state institution, they did it at very low cost for us. So we put
They
it
had
all,
the equipment that you need.
They had the equipment and the power, and of course we paid because but it was not like sending it out to somebody else who didn't really have the ability to do that. Now most of the other institutions were sending it out to people who were in the field of preservation microfilming, and the state library, they didn't think along those terms, but still, they did, and they did a very good job of filming this stuff. Now, part of my job was to oversee it, get it shipped down there, have it come back. Of course, they had to tear these folio volumes apart, so they came back as just individual. And there were not only diagrams, but there were also record books of what was spent and all sorts of stuff. I don't know how many reels of film we had. Lots of reels of film, which are now up. Well, there's a copy up in archives, and there was also a public use copy over in the Goss collection, but I'm not sure what's happened to that now.
I think the Goss has moved over to archives.
Yeah, they probably have both collections up there.
Right, yeah.
One copy is not for public use. It's a negative set for making positive sets for anybody who wants to use it, and the other one's a positive set for people who want to use it. So, my only qualm with, and this is just a slight thing. Part of my problem was to prepare the metadata for it according to NEH standards, and so I would have sheets to be put in and filmed along with it, and sometimes I didn't always get done down there, so some of the metadata is missing from some of this film, but it's still good.
Right. Okay.
So
You did where are the volumes now?
They were in the attic, and then we had to clear the attic because Jim was going to, turn the attic into the new archives.
Yeah.
Now, what I think happened, my memory is that they may have gone to archives. I think they were just sitting in boxes up there, and I think they went to archives, and I sort of said, I guess it's your problem now. I mean, we had the film, so there's no real reason we had to keep them. But, I mean, here are all these blueprints, wonderful blueprints. Do you really want to throw them out?
Some committees that you served on in the library, such as you've been on a number of search committees and the grievance committee for a long time.
Long time, yeah.
How about the that excellent 21 Council of Advocates? What committee was that?
Okay, well, this starts out a few years before that. This starts out over in process and government documents processing. A couple of years before that. We had a situation where government documents came in. They went over to the technical side, and there was a 2-year backlog over there getting them processed. And Emily Mobley says, can we have can we put together a way of improving the process? I think it's called process improvement. I mean, that's what this is about. That you just, I mean, it's about process improvement. And she asked me to head it up. So what we did was we got people from government documents. That would have been Bert Chapman and Lori Bryant, and then from the other side, Diana Grove, and other people over there who handled them. And we started having weekly meetings, and I had a little diagramming software, and so I started diagramming where everything went. We'd have these meetings, and I would diagram, and then we'd come back and I'd say, okay, this is the way it looks like now. Is this the way it should be? And they said, well, it'd make more sense if it went this way, and you did it here at this point. And we started changing things around. And I kind of ran the committee, and as people sat there and looked at the diagram and said, well, I have an idea. Let's do it this way. They really solved the problem. All I did was manage the process. And it was called a process improvement. So we got through with it, wrote up my report. This is what we should be done. We cleared up that backlog in about 2 months.
Good. How about the, are you still
So what happened was, since I was doing this, and this advisory committee was sort of an ongoing group of people who did that sort of thing. This Excellence 21 was a group from various departments on campus who were involved in process improvement, just like we had done in the library.
Right, yeah.
So we met together once a month to talk about what different groups on campus were doing to improve processes, to create efficiencies in various
there were
departments.
presentations too that would connection with that.
Yeah, there were some presentations. We had poster sessions. People would bring posters, and
right.
and so I think I did a poster. I vaguely remember doing a poster for what we had done, and
that
was during Dr. Beering's administration.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you the College of Liberal Arts Curriculum Committee? You're still on that?
I'm still on that.
Right, okay, and you've been on that for a long time.
A long time. We started somewhere in the 1990s. Here's what was happening. The way that the curriculum you have within the college at that time was a School of Liberal Arts or something. School of Liberal Arts and Education was what it was then. You had a curriculum committee, and you had requests from various departments going into the curriculum committee requesting new courses be added. Then once they were added, they would come to the library and say, we need materials for this course, and we would say, sorry, we don't have the money. Where's your money? You should have thought of that before you approved the course. So the idea was to get somebody from HSSE Library to sit on that committee to look at new courses coming in and make a decision, can we support that course? And that has been the function. And we changed the requirement rules for all incoming courses to have a bibliography of what Purdue held in that subject matter that would support that course. And if they didn't have enough materials, then they had to come in with an idea of, okay, where are we going to get the materials to support this course? You had to have,
Right.
It's been an interesting. I mean, we've supported new programs.
You work together. You need the materials. You've got the course.
You've got to have
the students have to have the materials.
Right. Yeah.
And they're not in the classroom.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. If particularly say, well, we're going to have there'll be a term paper, a 10-page, 20-page. It'll be 30% of the course grade, and you write on these subjects. The material has to be there. Yeah.
You worked under a couple of library directors. Mr. Dagnese was the director when you came, and then Emily and Jim Mullins.
Sure. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were the demographer. I think you talked about that when you were in NIA, MAY in 73, 74. You went over
that. Yeah, that was
big.
That's.
And then you got. What about that? The Title 12 grant, USAID for the reference works in Americana.
Actually, it was reference works in Africana.
Oh, Africana.
Yeah, it was Africana. Yeah,
okay.
At the time, that had to do with what was happening over in agricultural economics. It was like the whole College of Agriculture was taking a big turn toward Africa at that time.
Okay.
And I mean, in agronomy, other areas, and so there was a feeling that we needed more support material in dealing with sociology and economics and anthropology and the liberal arts areas in Africa as support for what was actually going on in the College of Agriculture. And so it wasn't a large grant.
Right.
But still, we were able to buy some materials.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Family. Talk about family. Is your you got children?
I have children. Yeah.
Did
Larry
any of
was
them come
15 months old when he came. Then Matthew was born right around Christmas time, 1978, I guess, about a year after we got here.
Okay.
And then Emily was born in 1985 when I was on sabbatical back in Paris. So, yeah.
Did any of the children come to Purdue?
None of them came to Purdue.
Okay.
Larry went to Ohio Wesleyan, which is where his mother went. Matthew did 1 year at Harvey Mudd, out in Los Angeles and then dropped out. He's still out there. Emily was accepted for a nursing program at IU. I better be careful what I say here. And then her significant other, boyfriend, went from IU to Indiana Wesleyan, so she went from IU to Indiana Wesleyan. She finished her nursing degree at Indiana Wesleyan.
Okay. Awards and honors. You got the Moriarty Award.
I had the Moriarty Award.
Any others that you care to comment on? Were there any others? Okay.
No.
The professional association, certainly ALA and
Yeah.
Society for French Historical Studies.
Yeah.
You still keep in touch with these associations?
Not too much. As I start winding down, last time I was at an ALA meeting was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
I've slowed down. Yeah.
It gets bigger all the time.
Yeah.
How about a Purdue tradition? Any come to mind?
No, Purdue tradition, not really.
Okay. How about an outstanding event?
Outstanding event.
It doesn't. Sometimes people say, "Does it have to be Purdue?" I said, "No. Anything outstanding event in your life? Anything?"
Oh, any outstanding event in my life. Well, it's interesting. When I left Ohio State to come to Purdue, people are saying, "You're going to an agricultural school." They use less polite terms. They call it cow college. I said,
But that's the land grant school. Ohio State is.
It is too, but they think of themselves as somehow superior. We're Ohio State. Well, we're this great cosmopolitan university. I said, that's fine. I don't mind going. Well, after I acquired tenure, we acquired 5 acres in the country, out south of Dayton Road. So we have 5 acres, an old house, 2 barns, a fenced pasture, and we had kids, and they were in 4-H, so we start raising sheep. Later, Emily comes along and wants horses, so we get into horses, and
It just worked, and it morphed in.
And of course that worked fine because we were already, because of my wife's work, we were already had contacts with people in the College of Agriculture here.
Sure.
In 1984, Jim Cullum over in International Programs in Agriculture said, "Hey, we have another big grant back in Africa, and we need somebody who knows about libraries to go out there. Would you go out there?" So 1984, I spent 6 weeks back in the MA, same country we'd worked in before, trying to, giving them advice on. They don't call them libraries, they call them documentation centers.
Yeah.
So they needed to build a documentation center. So I I spent 6 weeks out there. I put together a report on what the documentation center had to have, how to create the resources. They had almost nothing in journals out there, and then how to finance it, And back then, scientific journals were very expensive. I was saying to myself, I just don't see how they can't afford a library. So my project back then, selective dissemination of information, was the way to go, I felt. So I put together a project saying what you need to do. They had PCs out there, and I said, and at that the internet had not occurred yet, but things were coming out on disk. And I said, you need to.
You got a phone line. The phone line you can do something.
Yeah, their phone lines out there weren't up to that.
Yeah.
So I said, what you need to do is describe the CAB. That's Commonwealth Agricultural Bureau. So they're the ones that put it. They are the big putting out stuff on agriculture. So it's kind of expensive, but get the CDs here. Allow the researchers. There were about 40 or 50 Africans who did plant breeding, animal. They had 2 research stations out there. Right. You can search this. We can't afford the journals, but then you can send off your request, and we can mail them to you, and you can get your articles out here. And so I put together that report, and then in 1990, Jim asked me to go out again because by then they had built a new by then they had built a new documentation center. When I went out there in '84, it was just a couple of rooms in a building, and now they had this beautiful building. They had a woman who was trained documentalist. She had done her training in Senegal, and she was quite good, a hard worker. And so I went out for another 6 weeks in 1990, and they had things up and going pretty well. And so I was out there in 1990. I put together another report for USAID on things that might be done in addition to, but they'd done a really good job of putting things together. And then that was 1990, and then in 1991 they wanted the person who was in charge of the documentation center. Her name was Madame Hadiza Adamou. Of course, that's a French-speaking country, so she spoke French as well as a local. They wanted me to put together international programs. I could say, can you put together a training program for her in the U.S. Let her see what modern documentation is, because she'd been trained in Senegal, which is a good school, but still, they just didn't have it there. So I put together a training program for Hadiza. And I set it up for her to do summer school she knew English. It was a little shaky, but she knew English, which, if she didn't know English, she couldn't really do it. I set up 8 weeks training at the University of Illinois summer school, where she didn't really have to take the course for credit. In other words, she didn't have to take the exam. She could just sit in on it. Her English, she felt, wasn't good enough. And then after that, she went for 8 weeks of training. It's called the Arid Lands Research Center at the University of Arizona. Here at the University of Arizona had this Arid Lands Research, which is what Niger is, arid lands. And it's a research center at the University of Arizona that specializes in agriculture, development, water resource, and everything for the arid lands. And she spent 4 to 8 weeks there being taught by their head librarian on specialized resources dealing with arid lands. And so I put that together for her, and that was fun.
Yeah.
And then she came back here, and she had not met Emily. And I said, well, before you go, you need to meet Emily. So she goes in and meets Emily, and she's so happy when she meets Emily. She thought well, do I really have to do this? Oh, I think you'll, because she was afraid that, well, maybe the dean of libraries was going to look down on her. And of course, that was anything. Emily was so wonderful and receptive to her.
It was perfect.
It was perfect.
In closing, how about the liberal arts library in the 21st century? Any comments?
It's going to change, but slowly.
Okay.
The people in liberal arts, they change slower than the rest. But that's fine, because that's what they do.
Right.
I see some big possibilities coming. I think the greatest thing that has happened in the field of for the liberal is the Hadi Trust, the ability. I'm right now working on a project with Charlotte Erdman. We were trying to put together a list of ebooks. In certain ebooks that are not being used, so she can put them together for some of the people in bioengineering over there. Well, to do the project, I had to go in and say, well, what ebooks do we have? Let's just start with a total list of all the ebooks. Well, I was surprised. We had 1,100,000 ebooks here. Well, how do we have that many books? Well, it's because of Hadi Trust, 250,000. Maybe 500,000 from they weren't, as it turned out, only about 150,000 were current scientific ebooks. But still, I started with a big list, and it's amazing what we have here. They're all on Voyager. You can look them up. They're there, and I think people are really finding that a wonderful resource. These are books no way we would have ever acquired. That Google Books and Hadi have scanned, put up electronically, 19th century, 18th century, early 20th century. There's just all sorts of materials out there.
Bring the world to your...
Bring the world to you.
Right to your desktop.
Right.
Liberal, I want to thank you, Stewart, very
Sure.
much. Anything that I forgot to ask that you want to...
I think that's it.
I really appreciate that, and I should also say that he's going to be retiring on June 30th, but he'll keep in touch. We'll
I
miss
will
you.
keep in touch.
Okay. Thank you, Stewart.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
I've enjoyed it.
Very good.
Very good.